The town of Willow Creek had always lived in a kind of slow, comfortable rhythm, a place where nothing much ever changed, and people liked it that way. Life was measured not by urgency but by the steady passing of seasons. On the edge of this sleepy town, nestled behind a row of aging oak trees, stood a dimly lit garage where Owen Carter spent most of his days. The old wooden sign above the door simply read Carter's Garage, its paint flaking but proud. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of motor oil, sawdust, and the faint metallic tang of worn steel. Owen, a seasoned mechanic in his late 50s, worked tirelessly, his hands hardened and scarred by decades of wrenching engines back to life. Each line on his face told a story of perseverance, of mornings spent hunched over engines and nights where the only sound was the quiet ticking of cooling metal. Owen had been fixing cars since he was 16, following the path laid down by his father, who had opened the garage after returning from the Korean War. It wasn't the kind of place that attracted wealthy clients with luxury vehicles. Instead, it was where struggling families brought battered pickup trucks and dented minivans, knowing that Owen would do what he could, charging only what they could afford, or sometimes nothing at all. But times were changing. Flashy new auto shops with gleaming showrooms and digital diagnostics had sprung up even in sleepy Willow Creek, pulling away what few customers Owen still had. The bills piled up on his battered oak desk, each envelope another reminder of how close he was to losing everything his family had built. Owen tried to push the anxiety aside, focusing instead on the tasks in front of him, the repairs he could still make, the engines he could still coax into running. It was on a quiet, sun-drenched afternoon when everything changed. The soft chime of the garage's front bell echoed through the open space, pulling Owen out of the carburetor he was cleaning. Wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt, he looked toward the entrance and saw a young boy standing in the doorway. No older than 10, the boy's left pant leg was neatly folded at the knee, revealing the absence of a limb. Standing behind him was a woman, his mother, her hands gripping the straps of her purse so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Afternoon," Owen said, his voice deep, edged with a kindness that came naturally to him. The boy hesitated, glancing up at his mother for reassurance. She gave him a gentle nudge forward. "My name's Caleb," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My mom said you fix things." Owen crouched so he wouldn't tower over the boy, smiling warmly. "That's right, Caleb. I fix all sorts of things. What can I help you with?" Caleb bit his lip, his eyes wide with hope. "Can you fix me?" The words hit Owen harder than any wrench ever could. He had seen his share of hardship, veterans who had returned from wars missing limbs, machinists who had lost fingers to heavy equipment. But there was something about the way Caleb asked, so direct and earnest, that rooted itself deep in Owen's heart. Caleb's mother stepped forward, her voice quivering. "Last year, a drunk driver ran a red light. Caleb was riding his bike." She paused, swallowing hard. "He lost his leg." Owen listened silently, his gaze flickering down to Caleb's neatly folded pant leg. There was no prosthetic, no support, just a boy standing as tall as he could, carrying far more than his small frame should ever have to bear. "The hospital gave us options," she continued, her voice tight with the strain of held-back tears. "But the good prosthetics, they cost more than I make in a year." Owen looked into Caleb's eyes and saw not pity, not sadness, but a fierce, stubborn resilience. Caleb wasn't asking for charity. He was asking for a chance. For a long moment, Owen said nothing. Then his gaze shifted toward the corner of the garage where stacks of unused wood planks leaned against the wall. It had been years since he'd built anything by hand, decades since he'd crafted anything other than engine parts. But maybe, just maybe, today called for something different. "How about this?" Owen said, his voice low and steady. "Give me a few days. Let's see what I can come up with." Hope sparked in Caleb's eyes, so bright it nearly took Owen's breath away. His mother's face crumpled, a hand flying to her mouth to catch the sob that threatened to escape. "You don't have to," she began. "I know," Owen said gently, "but I want to." For the next 3 days, Owen worked harder than he had in years. He studied prosthetic designs late into the night, flipping through medical journals, watching grainy online videos, reading engineering blueprints he could barely afford to print. He sanded wood until it was as smooth as silk under his calloused fingers, measured and remeasured, adjusted every angle and joint until it matched Caleb's size and stride. By the time the last bolt was tightened, Owen hadn't just built a wooden leg, he had crafted something far greater. A chance at freedom. A way for a boy to take back a piece of the life he had lost. The morning Caleb returned to the garage, Owen stood waiting, holding the polished wooden prosthetic like a treasure. Caleb stared at it with wide, disbelieving eyes. "You really made this for me?" he whispered. Owen smiled, his heart hammering in his chest. "Give it a try, kid." With cautious hands, Caleb strapped the prosthetic onto what remained of his leg. He tested his weight gingerly. And then, holding his breath, he took a step. A real step. Caleb's mother burst into tears, her face crumpling as she watched her son shift his weight and take another step. And then another. Caleb's face broke into a grin so wide and full of life that it made Owen's chest ache with something he hadn't felt in a long time, pure, unfiltered pride. It works," Caleb shouted, laughing. "Told you," Owen said, crossing his arms and chuckling. "I fixed things." Caleb didn't just walk. He ran, awkwardly at first, then smoother, laughing the whole time, his joy ringing off the garage walls. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what he had gained. Owen thought that was the end of it. A good deed. A bright day. He had no idea it was only the beginning. The very next morning, as Owen sipped his coffee and wiped the sleep from his eyes, he heard the deep, synchronized rumble of engines approaching. Frowning, he set his mug down and stepped outside. For sleek black SUVs, polished to a mirror shine, rolled to a stop in front of his garage. Their presence was so stark, so completely out of place among the dirt roads and rickety houses of Willow Creek, that Owen's first thought was that he was in trouble. The doors opened in unison, and several men in sharp suits stepped out, their movements crisp and purposeful. Owen wiped his hands instinctively on his jeans, his body tensing. The man who approached first was older, with silver hair and a calm, commanding presence. He extended his hand. "Owen Carter?" he asked. "That's me," Owen replied, shaking his hand firmly. "My name is Samuel Whitaker," the man said with a polite smile. "I run Whitaker Biomechanics, one of the country's leading prosthetics and rehabilitation engineering firms." Owen blinked. "You're a long way from the city." Samuel chuckled. "We heard about something remarkable." He paused meaningfully. "We heard about you." Owen's chest tightened. He said nothing, waiting. Samuel continued, his voice earnest. "A boy who needed a chance. A man who built a prosthetic out of wood and grit, with nothing more than skill and heart. That's the kind of innovation we can't teach." He nodded to one of his associates, who stepped forward with a sleek black folder. "This," Samuel said, "is a proposal. We want you to join our team. Led a new division, one focused on affordable prosthetics for families who can't pay the outrageous prices currently on the market." Owen swallowed hard as he opened the folder. Inside was an offer beyond anything he had ever dreamed. A salary that would wipe away his debts. Funding to turn his garage into a state-of-the-art development center. A chance to build not just for one boy, but for thousands. Owen faltered. "I don't know what to say." Samuel smiled warmly. "Then just say yes." And so Owen did. Weeks later, the transformation was complete. Carter's garage had become a beacon of innovation, filled with engineers, doctors, and dreamers, all working toward a single goal, mobility for all. But Owen's favorite day wasn't the grand opening or the first news article written about him. It was the day Caleb returned, wheeling into the newly renovated workshop, his eyes wide with wonder. "You're making legs for more kids like me?" he asked. "That's the plan," Owen said, ruffling Caleb's hair. Caleb grinned. "You're famous now." Owen laughed, shaking his head. "No, kid. I'm just getting started." And as he watched Caleb take his first steps on a newly designed prototype, a lightweight, cutting-edge prosthetic that Owen himself had helped craft, he realized something powerful. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness don't just change one life. They ignite a movement that can change the world.